There's a white man, a white gentleman, and he's qualified to be talking about this whole thing. And I want you guys to listen to him because now in South Africa, this weekend, load shedding started midnight Saturday. During the day, it went Saturday, different times in different places. And he's talking and exposing some things many people would never know until they listen to him about why load shedding might be coming back and why people need to be aware. But I want you guys to listen to him so you can understand something about the country we live in. Listen here.
What the big surprise was that we haven't had any load shedding now for.
If we've been enjoying the past 10 months with no load shedding, is this expected, and should South Africans be wary?
I think what the big surprise was that we haven't had any load shedding now for 300 days. Let's just think about the situation we were in exactly a year ago. It was almost non-stop load shedding. And just as we got into this situation slowly, I expected that we were going to get out of it slowly. So I think everybody, I was certainly wrong. My predictions were that, this is going to slowly get better. 5 years' time, we'll be kind of okay again. But they surprised everybody, and everybody was full of praise for Eskom and wondering exactly how did they manage to do that. I think maybe what we've got today is a little bit more reality, so we can see that even though we haven't had load shedding, we were quite often relatively close to it. The reserves, where, it's like walking along here and you do one little step too far and you fall down the hole. And I think a lot of the last 300 days have been a bit like that. And it's just now that they couldn't really hold it anymore. The problems had already developed about a week ago when several of their units crashed, and in particular a two power station which had been very reliable in the past, Matimba and Letabo, they lost 3 units, which is half of their capacity each. In addition to various other problems that were there. So that those two altogether amount to something like 3 stages of load shedding. So if that hadn't happened, we would have been okay. They also tried to do what Eskom normally does when they're in danger of load shedding. They then start burning diesel, and they use their pump storage facilities, which is basically they've got some dams where if there's a power shortage, they allow water to run down, and then when they have sufficient power again, they pump it back up again. So what this weekend is all about is pumping the water back up to the top again, and just making sure that the open cycle gas turbines where they burn the diesel get their diesel stocks back to where they should be.
But for many South Africans, Prof, this feels so abrupt. I mean, we were just enjoying, like I was saying, these few months of no load shedding, and then all of a sudden we plunge back into stage 3. Do you think the non-communication might have implications in terms of how South Africans are now going to prepare themselves for this?
Okay, what Eskom could have done is... and they used to do that a lot in the past. They used to tell us how many of their units are down at any particular point. I think they've stopped doing that. Had we known that, we would have probably seen that something's happening. I think maybe they thought that they'll probably get through this and nobody will really notice. They don't want to start panic. I believe the rand crashed a little bit as a result of this, so that too plays a role.
Yeah.
So I do believe, in general, Eskom should communicate a bit more than they do. I think they need to take the public more into their confidence. But I can also see why they don't want to create unnecessary panic. But I think in this case, yes, I think they knew they were in difficulty. And then today they eventually said, well, there's a high possibility of load shedding. But I think then already they knew that they'll probably need to do what they have done.
So in your view, Prof, I mean, was Eskom genuinely on the mend prior to these breakdowns?
Yes, and I think they still are. And there's a couple of reasons for them. It certainly helped that Kusile, which had 3 of its units under repair for almost a year, the whole of 2023. If those had been operating, we wouldn't have had nearly as bad load shedding as we did. The fact that they managed to get those back again, I think that helped a lot. But in general, I think where the real difference also came in is that they seem to have gotten their maintenance program and their just a general repair program better organized than it was before. I'm not exactly sure what was going wrong before that, but they certainly made a lot of progress on that front. But they have got old equipment. Those coal power stations are all at the point where one would normally be starting to think of closing them down. And just like any old machinery, once it gets to that point and once you start getting things breaking, it's very difficult to get them back to where they were before. And I think that also, so in a sense, we should expect more breakdowns from these coal power stations than we would have had about 20 years ago. And I think that's also one of the reasons why Eskom was hoping to get a higher tariff, because I think they realized that, yes, it's been very nice how they managed to improve the performance of their coal power stations, but all this came at a bit of a cost. And I don't think that it's not the sort of thing that they'll talk about that much, but there was that cost factor involved. Speaking
of that cost factor, Prof, I mean, this load shedding warning comes a day after NERSA has approved an average tariff of 12.74%, whereas Eskom had asked for a 36.15%. And I mean, the Eskom chair had said that they welcome this, but they would have much rather wanted that 36.15%. Is it realistic on South Africans' pockets? How do they balance in terms of that balance sheet? I mean, he spoke about a weak balance sheet that has left the entity with less funds to do all of this maintenance. But of course, there's South Africans who are expected to pay these tariffs. Is it a realistic path that we are walking on?
Yes, I haven't seen the reasons given by NERSA for their decision. I think that's still going to come. But ultimately, I'm not sure if anybody was in favor of that 36% other than Eskom themselves.
Right.
And they did justify it. They made a case. A lot of it was based on factors that one could argue about. For example, they were expecting the price of coal to go up. And given that that's the main fuel that's powering the country, they were expecting they were going to need more money for that. Whether that is a genuine concern, whether that is indeed going to happen, well, one never really knows with these sort of resources.
Yeah.
I think it was quite clear they weren't going to get that immediately. I was predicting they were going to get roughly 18% and quite possibly then do what they've done in previous years. That's also what happened in previous years. NERSA went with the public interest, weighted up with what Eskom wanted, but ultimately gave Eskom a much lower increase than what they asked for.